Yo, what is going on, everybody? I appreciate y'all for tuning in. Hey, what's going on? I appreciate you. Hey, first comment of the day. Hey, shout out to you, Maddie. I appreciate you for dropping that comment. Hey, I appreciate everybody tuned in, but a round of applause to you for the first comment before I even got out the intro. Shout out to you. My guy, my brother Wolverine, what is up? Yo, in this video, we're gonna talk a little bit about land banks. The last video we did, we talked on the subpoena that was issued with a signature date, the date of the election in the village of Dalton. Happy Friday to everyone. Happy Friday, Natalie. Everybody, Jerry, what is going on? I appreciate everybody for tuning in. We talked a little bit about the subpoena, and y'all just went ballistic in the chat as they talked about the property finessing and everything that was going on. So I said, you know what? Let's talk a little bit about land banks so we can get some context of what it is and why, if Tiffany Henyard participated in a land bank finesse. It's probably one of the stupidest finesses that you can do because it's very, very difficult to get away with. We're going to talk a little bit about it. We're going to look at some of the policies for the Cook County Land Bank, which makes it even more difficult. Now, before we even get on the land bank side of the game, let's pivot and talk about a few things that just okay, nice. You work with local land banks. Okay, that's good. I especially in Michigan, I used to deal with land banks. It was properties that just were blighted properties that just needed to be destroyed, and people would get a lot of money to destroy these properties to try to rejuvenate the community, and they would do it incorrectly. They would just knock the property down and throw a bunch of dirt over it, and then they already finessed the federal government out a shitload of money. So a lot of schemes attempt to go on when it comes to land banks. Hey, I appreciate it. Thank you for being subscribed for over 1 month. Hey, shout out to you. Yeah, it's pretty bad. Exactly. It was a big case we had some years back on the illegal destruction of blighted property. It was a whole big land bank mess. But before we dive in, I wanted to talk about a few things. Point number one, before we turn to the land banks and looking at it and why it's so hard to finesse, that's why it's actually a dumb scheme to try to do, especially if you don't have the resources to effectuate it. But point number one, I originally did a video. Hey, shout out to Mom for Life. What's going on? I appreciate you for tuning in. Co-counsel, definitely grateful for you as well. Yeah, that's where it was at. It was in Detroit. That's exactly where it was at. I ain't going, but it was a interesting case nonetheless. So I did a video probably about last week because I didn't really do any Henyard video because I just tired of it. I'm gonna just be honest. I was like, we just save it for Friday. We'll save it for Friday. But I did a video where the very first comment that was made by Tiffany Henyard, as reported by a media outlet, was actually something that was it was like kind of positive and productive. And I was really shocked. I was like, wow, I'm impressed. Now, it could have it probably was cap. And I think in that video I said, we'll wait to see what her first social media post was. And I just bring that up because true indeed, her next social media post was exactly what we thought it would be, a complete lack of accountability. So it was nothing. I was actually shocked that the first statement that the media outlet had when they reached out to her, it was one that was not tomfoolery and crazy. But I knew the subsequent social media posts that follow would be more of what we could come to usually expect. Now, I don't anticipate seeing her. Uh, that's funny. Now, that's funny. Hey, shout out to catching the live stream. I appreciate you tuning in. I'm just saying. Now, I did hear she was in California. I don't know. I'm already waiting for people to put out videos saying she's on the lam. I don't think that's what it is. But I wasn't shocked when the social media post that followed the statement that appeared to be one of a lucid thinking person was complete lack of accountability. I brought that up to say let's take a look at the independent candidate who is going to be running in the general election against Jason House. Now, it's interesting. I haven't dived in, and I might do a video because I don't know how I mean, I don't know. I think it's a foregone conclusion that Jason House is going to win, and probably by a landslide. But they actually did an interview with the independent candidate who's running for mayor in the general election. Now, we aren't going to watch a lot of it, maybe 2 minutes. But one thing jumped out to me exactly. That's why I was like, hey, I, I'm not saying she gonna get in there and be complete crook. All I'm saying is there's some things in her background that probably would give me cause to pause. But I thought this was interesting because what's going on, brother? I appreciate you tuning in, Harley. I thought this was interesting. I want to play this video real quick. And I didn't even watch all of this video. I just kind of skipped around to this one part. And I thought this was a very interesting takeaway. So let's watch this and then we'll pivot and jump on our main topic, talking about how an attempted land bank scam is the dumbest type of scam to do if Tiffany Henyard, as alleged, did participate in one. But check out this right here. We have independent candidate for Dalton Mayor, Cassandra Hobson Jordan. She sat down for a one-on-one interview. Let's listen to just the first these. We're at the 5 minute mark. Let's listen to about a minute and a half, 2 minutes, because something jumped out to me immediately as I watched this interview.
There are a lot of issues that, Lori Lightfoot was hired by majority trustees to look into. A lot of issues that she brought to light. Any of those issues really stick out to you that you think really need to be paid attention to or focused on?
Well, definitely the finances. When you look at the deficit and you look at bills not being paid, you look at the mismanagement of money, that is one of the main things that we truly have to focus on. You have to manage your money. You got to budget your money. You got to live not beneath your means, but you got to live within your means. So that's one of the main issues is the budget and transparency. I hear a lot of people say transparency, but are you really telling us the truth as far as to what's going on with the village? And honestly, I think not. There's a lot that's really going on that the people really don't even know. And it's important to be transparent.
I just wanted to play that clip. Now, I don't think that is I don't know. I mean, if I were there and I were voting, I'm probably voting for Jason House. But I played that clip because her interview just goes to highlight how terrible of a public speaker and doing media outlets that Tiffany Henyard was. Whatever we have to say about this woman politics, at least in this interview, it didn't come off as super hood. It didn't come off as super hood. She actually answered the questions. And I'm just going to be honest. I think any politician who runs after someone who has conduct as egregious and ridiculous as Tiffany Henyard can make themselves look like, I don't know, who's a great politician that everybody unilaterally agree is a great politician. Abraham Lincoln. Like I'm gonna say Lincoln because he freed the slaves. Abraham Lincoln. But I thought it was interesting because this is just something that we haven't seen in a while. It was a softball question because we know transparency is going to be the thing that everyone runs on. But I'm just excited to see someone who can actually have a conversation with the media outlet and it not turn into Goonfest 2025 on both sides. Like, regardless of what their politics are, Jason House and her, at least in this interview, I'm not going to say it. There's no hood video footage out there because there is, but we won't go into that right now. But at least for purposes of the mayoral general election, it appears to have some level of adulthood, some level of professionalism between the two candidates. And I think that is very important. Real quick, let's see. I know I saw you left a comment on this on the other video. I am going to cover this. Jackson, Mississippi. Damn, the mayor and the DA got it. You a DA, you get a federal indictment. You a scumbag. But yeah, we'll definitely cover that. Let me hit these comments up real quick. Then we're going to pivot into the land bank. I don't know. Her real name isn't Cassandra Hobson Jordan. I don't know. I'm assuming that's what it was. Bumblebee, what is good? We gonna talk about that, Nixon. I don't think Nixon is universally. I don't think Nixon is universally considered a well liked president. But we can agree to disagree on that. I don't know, man. I'd be shocked if they got any money. Okay, that's why you said that. So nobody know what her real name is. Okay, I'm tracking. So let's go ahead and pull up this document. Every now and then, I like to take some notes. So let's go ahead so we can know what is going on, and we're going to look at the policies and procedures of the Cook County Land Bank. Let's see. Let's share the screen. Window, Word document. Okay. All right. So I just got it up on the screen so we all can see. A land bank is a public or community owned entity that acquires, manages. Let me move this over. That acquires, manages, and repurposes vacant, abandoned, and tax delinquent properties to return them to productive use and to meet community goals, such as stabilizing neighborhoods and increasing affordable housing. Here's a more detailed explanation. The purpose: land banks aim to address problems caused by vacant, abandoned, and deteriorated properties by acquiring them and then either holding them for strategic use or transferring them to responsible buyers and developers. And we're going to talk about the transfer because there are certain persons who are actually barred legally, who are actually barred from purchasing land from the Cook County Land Bank. How they work: land banks are typically created by local municipalities or counties and are often given unique powers through state laws to acquire property, clear titles, and sell or lease properties. Flexibility, prioritizing community needs over market value. Land banks can help communities by returning vacant properties to productive use, facilitating neighborhood revitalization, helping to address the need for affordable housing, mitigating the negative effects of gentrification, and stabilizing property values. It's not a financial institution. Land banks are not traditional financial institutions, but rather public or community owned entities with a specific mission. Land bank activities: acquiring tax foreclosed properties, holding properties until they can be reused strategically, facilitating redevelopment of properties, prioritizing the redevelopment of properties as affordable housing, and partnering with developers to build affordable housing. Now, since we are talking about the Cook County Land Bank, of course, the first thing I did was type in Cook County Land Bank scheme, and I wanted to see if there were prior fraud related to the land bank in Cook County. If so, how far away? What was it? And literally, as soon as I typed that up, something popped up. Before I could type, I put in Cook County Land Bank SCH, and the very first thing was school, and the second thing was scheme. And I was like, interesting. So something did go on. Let's take a look at this article. This is in 2003. An ex-employee of Cook County Land Bank Authority sentenced to 1 year in prison after pleading guilty to a fraud scheme. Give me 1 second. Let's make that a little bigger. All right. A former employee of Cook County's Land Bank Authority who pled guilty to a fraud scheme that involved buying properties from that agency in order to redevelop and sell them for his own benefit has been sentenced to a year in federal prison. Mustafa Seller, 37, was sentenced last week to a year and 1 day in prison after he pled guilty earlier this year to a charge of wire fraud. We talked about wire fraud a bunch on this channel. Essentially using electronics, wired means of communication, cell phone, email, computer, text message, to continue a fraud scheme is essentially what wire fraud is. Seller worked as an asset manager for the Cook County Land Bank Authority, which allows for vacant, foreclosed, abandoned, and tax delinquent real estate properties to be bought and redeveloped by private owners. Federal prosecutors allege that from 2016 to 2021, that's a long ass time, Seller recruited people to pose as independent buyers and then had them purchase 6 land bank properties located in Chicago, Oak Lawn, and Midlothian on his behalf. Employees were prohibited from having a financial interest and property maintenance company contracting with the agency. After those properties were purchased, redeveloped, and then sold again, Seller allegedly had the straw buyers pay him the proceeds from the sale. According to the prosecutors, Seller also formed a property maintenance company in 2016 called Evergreen Property Services, using another individual to pose as his owner, and then caused the Land Bank Authority to contract with Evergreen and pay it more than $1 million for property maintenance services over the next 3 years. He actually got out light. 1 year for this scheme that lasted from 2016 to 2021 to include contract fraud, and the payout was more than $1 million. He actually got a great, that's wow. 1 year is, I mean, he ain't got no assets from it. He probably ain't keep none of this shit, but that's still a pretty good deal considering what he was facing with the wire charge. I think 1 year of wire fraud could be up to 20 years in prison, if I'm not mistaken. Federal prosecutors had sought a 33-month sentence, arguing in a sentencing memorandum that Seller manipulated and abused his position of public trust in an important government organization for his own financial benefit. Defendant directly interfered with the Cook County Land Bank Association's mission and deprived honest individuals of the benefit and opportunities that the Cook County Land Bank was specifically designated to provide. Prosecutors wrote in the memorandum, moreover, defendants' adverse impacts on the Cook County Land Bank and individuals in the community was not a mere collateral consequence of the defendant's scheme, but instead was necessary to defendant's scheme and intended by the defendant. Now, this is interesting because this is generally the only outline of a scheme that you can finesse from a land bank when it relates to the purchasing of property and selling it. So it's very simple. It's actually, I don't want to tell nobody what schemes to do, but you would probably be better off doing fraud related to destroying properties that are in disrepair as opposed to a land bank scheme, because that is actually a much more difficult case to investigate. But generally, you buy property in some means at a lower rate, you hold on to it, you sell it to developers. So we know with the subpoena that was issued, it's related to a land transaction that occurred where the property was held by Tiffany Henyard's then current boyfriend, Kamal Woods. I think the biggest thing is, I don't know, the property was purchased for $80,000. It's allegedly to have been owned by the land bank, as there was a vet, I believe, on the property that was just not being used. It was in disrepair. I'm a little bit confused because one thing that they're clearly going to look into is, one, did he in fact have the assets to be able to purchase this property? I'd look open source wise, and it's hard to look up people information unless they have like a government job and their salaries and benefits. But the very first question is, did bro have $80,000 to be able to buy this property? If the answer is yes, the next question would be, okay, when he purchased this property and sold this property for $200,000 and made a $120,000 profit, was there any kickback of monies that was given to Tiffany Henyard? If the answer is yes to that, clearly you can identify, and they talked about it in that article we read, in that example, Kamal Woods would have been used as a straw purchaser, the exact same thing that Mr. Seller did in his land bank scheme that ended him up in prison for 1 year, which was a great deal considering he got a $1 million+ contract. But we got to take a look because the policies and procedures of the land bank are very specific. One thing that makes it difficult to perform these type of schemes is you will need more than one person. You will need a straw person to serve as a buyer. You will need to identify and have a seller. You will need someone on the land bank to actually approve the purchase if that person isn't you. So it's just a whole bunch of hurdles. Let's take a look at the comments, and then we're going to pull up the actual policy and procedures around the Cook County Land Bank Authority and see what they have written in here to try to put an edit or circumvent people from actually doing what it is alleged that Tiffany Henyard has done with a finesse of the land bank. Let me go ahead and add this to the screen. Then I jump in, we'll check out the comments, and then we'll dive in. Let's go ahead and add that. Let's do it this way. Now let's take a look at some of the comments real quick. She has a stank attitude. I'm just looking at some of the okay. All right, let's see. That's where I left off. Like button, like button. All right, let's see. Aliases and financial woes. Yeah. Nope, you're wrong. You must didn't see her other video. No, I said in that video. I specifically said I saw other videos out there that was giving hood and crazy. But in that video, it was something that was calm and she conducted herself like an adult. Don't misquote me. Y'all always like misquote me. Don't misquote me. I wasn't giving her a round of applause. Oh, this was your job for a national nonprofit. So you probably seen a lot of fraud. This is my favorite part of your platform. The nerdy stuff. Shout out to everybody who here for the nerdy stuff that we're going to dive into. I remember she is a realtor and probably wants to buy those abandoned houses. Remember, she says she has investors ready to buy her. She did say that in the interview. So, hey, but okay. There, I don't know. Like, I don't know. It's weird because if you're an investor and it's a property that's already abandoned, like how much of a deal do you need to be able to make a profit on the shit? Like, I don't know. Like, do you need to be mayor to be able to invest in cheap ass abandoned properties? Like, honestly, it would behoove you not to be mayor. Then you won't have a bar to being able to purchase from them. It's actually easier to do it if you're an independent person as opposed to a government official because now it's a legit transaction. And I think the other thing is when people do these schemes, do you think if I'm a developer buying depressed properties, you think I'm buying a property and I don't already have a seller lined up? Like, so I don't even know if she did say she's an investor and she mentioned something related to the properties. That's an actual great point. But I don't know. Like, I don't see what the benefit would be. Like, you don't need to be at one, you don't need to be a realtor to invest in properties. Two, I don't see what benefit is actually more beneficial not to be associated with government and you can do the exact same thing. And it'll probably not be illegal if you're doing it because you're an investor. It's your job to buy depressed assets and flip them for a profit. That's the whole name of the game. So I don't know. I think I think if you're trying to finesse a land bank and depress properties, I wouldn't want to be an elected official to do it. I would just rather be cool with being Joe Citizen because it's less shady. Yeah, she's a flipper. Interesting. We just covering this because a lot of people had mentioned in the comments that it was a land bank finesse grab. So I'm gonna talk about why it's very, very difficult to do and get away with. It's just too many edits in place, and we'll see all the edits that once we go through this policy and procedure. I guarantee you. Oh, let me read this. Kamal going to throw Tiff under the driver's side of the bus, and Tiff throw Kamal under the passenger side. But I mean, if you're a prosecutor, who would you rather prosecute, Kamal Woods or Tiffany Henyard? I'm going after the former mayor. Like, it is what it is. I could care less about what Kamal Woods did. Like, it's a shitload of Kamal Woods out there. I mean, to be fair, there's a shitload of mayors out there committing fraud too. But the mayor is the much more attractive case. Like, nobody cares if you throw Kamal Woods under the bus. I don't care if you throw some dude who, like, there's no value in it for me. Is like, you're the mayor. If you want to throw somebody on the bus as a mayor, it better be a state senator. Otherwise, I don't want to hear it. Yeah, behoove you. Facts. All right, let's take a look at this land bank policy, and we're just gonna go through and take a look at some of the highlight portions. It's not long, but I'm just not reading all this. Okay, we already know the role as a public authority and the established. The purpose: the land bank is established to acquire, hold, transfer interest in real property. Now, here are the priorities: neighborhood revitalization, affordable housing, economic development, conservation for the purpose and reuse of land for environmental conservation or other greening purposes. Neighborhood consultant. I thought this was actually interesting. The land bank, when applicable and feasible, expect applicants seeking to acquire properties from the land bank to demonstrate prior consultation with neighborhood associations and nonprofit entities in the geographical location of the property. That in and of itself is an edit. What I can gather from that is they want to make efforts to make sure the buyers who are acquiring property from the land bank to use it in whatever those four areas are: economic development, revitalization, affordable housing. They want to make sure that that person has talked to the community and has the buy-in from the community. Normally, depending on, because again, if you're buying something from the land bank to revitalize it and you don't know who the purchaser is and what they're going to be doing, you should get out of the business of property because you don't know what the hell you're doing. That's why it's kind of confusing, even though it's not a land bank transaction or may not be a land bank transaction. I heard a lot of you in the comments saying that Kamal allegedly bought this property for $80,000, sold it for $200,000. Then after they sold it and made their profit, when they found out that this restaurant was being built, they felt some type of way because they thought they could have gotten more. Like, you don't know what the hell you're doing if you're buying depressed property and you don't already have a seller in mind. Or even worse, you buy depressed property and you sell it, and at no time before the closing do you ask, what are you all going to do on the property? That's just absolutely ridiculous. But I think the neighborhood consult is just an edit to make sure that the purchaser has the buy-in to the community for whatever plans that they have. And I've seen that happen actually when they were building a house next to mine. Like, so that's one thing. Okay. Municipalities with populations over 100,000, any transaction involving property located within the municipality with a population over $100,000 shall only be made pursuant to the agreement between the municipality and the land bank according to the ordinance establishing the land bank. Just another edit in place. Here, the only reason they're focused on the population is because when you have a population over $100,000, the more 100,000 persons is just really math. The more people you have, the higher amount of depressed property, depressed real property that you're going to have. So there's going to be much more opportunity to buy. So there has to be an agreement between the Cook County Land Bank and the municipality because they just want, I mean, and there's a good way to also make sure that I would probably want to prevent this, that large corporations aren't coming in and monopolizing the depressed property to build housing and now jack up the rent rates for everybody. So I think that's an overall good edit. All right. Qualifications, the legal status of an applicant. All right. The legal status of an applicant has to disclose its organizational and financial structure and operational capacity and the applicant's prior experience in developing and managing a real property. So point number one, let's just start as we read this. We talked about the other edits. This is probably one of the more serious edits. This makes it difficult to finesse a land bank. To even apply, you have to disclose the name of your government corporate entity, whether it's a LLC or doing business as or a corporation. You have to disclose that, and disclosing that, you have to disclose the articles of incorporations that you file with the Secretary of State to establish that entity. And one thing that's on every articles of incorporation when you create an entity, it was on a couple of them that I created throughout my lifetime, is the name of the person who is starting it. It's either going to be the name of the person who's trying to commit the dumbass fraud scheme, but more likely than that, if they're actually trying to be smart, they'll probably use a straw person, a third party. If they're trying to be real smart, they would use an LLC to create an LLC. if you want to be real smart, but most people aren't going to go through those hurdles. And even if you go through those hurdles, there's always an identifying point in the paperwork. So let's say, for example, let's just use an example. Let's say the Tiffany Henyard Cares Foundation wanted to say, you know what, as a nonprofit, we want to buy this property that we identified in Dalton. We're going to build a treatment facility for people suffering for cancer. And, that's our goal. Well, they have to disclose their paperwork that established that LLC. Let's say that Tiffany Henyard Cares Foundation was underneath another LLC, which was underneath another LLC. It requires a lot of work to create all of these shell companies, and it requires even more context to have different people who actually have the understanding to sign off on the creation of each entity. Normally, when you see a bunch of shell companies, the number one reason they get caught is just looking for duplicate signatures. You'll notice that, hey, and normally how they always get caught, they always use the same attorney. Like, if you're committing a fraud scheme, you don't get 7 attorneys. You get one attorney to kind of run things through. And normally that's where the first identifier is. They use the same attorney to develop company A. Then they put company A under company B. Then they put company B under company C. And then they'll say, you know what? Company C is under 2 companies. Let's use this company to submit our application to buy this depressed property. And that's how it's figured out. So that's the very first edit. That's a real hard edit where that disclosure of the articles that establish you as an organization are going to be an immediate red flag if something shady is going on. Now, I will tell you, I don't know who's looking at it. They're probably not even doing a deep dive. So it is possible that an applicant can get over this hurdle, because I'm assuming it's probably hey, we got people in the chat who worked in the land bank. I don't think that they're doing a deep of a dive to identify those type of things. I think they're just looking to say, okay, you're trying to purchase property under this LLC. You provided your articles of incorporation. We can check with the Secretary of State to make sure you're in good standing. That's probably the minimal threshold that they're doing. But if fraud is in play, they're going to look at all of those LLCs, all of the articles of incorporation, find the common denominator, which is normally the attorney or the CPA or some brainiac guy who probably created all these companies and actually came up with this dumbass idea in the first place. All right. Reserve discretion. The land bank reserves full and complete discretion to decline applications for proposed transaction agreements from individuals and entities for the following: failure to perform in prior transactions. So if you try to do business with them and it didn't go through, they reserve the right not to rock with you. Prior or current ownerships of property that became delinquent for tax payments and remain delinquent for tax payments during their ownership. If you got properties and you're not paying your bills, they're not going to rock with you. They reserve the right not to rock with you. They may do it if it's a good business opportunity, but these are things where they can say, we're not going to do business with you because you're giving inclinations that you don't know what the hell you're doing. What would draw a red flag to this category? Hold on. We're going to go ahead and go through this first, and I'll bring up something that I identify as a red flag when we look for these reasons to decline to allow someone to purchase a property owned by the land bank. All right. Number 3, parties that are barred from transactions with local government entities. parties that are unable to demonstrate sufficient experience and capacity to perform in accordance with the requirements of the land bank. This one jumped out at me, letter D, why they have reserved the right to decline to do business with somebody. Because if you all remember, again, we're just under the assumption, this is just a hypothetical, if Tiffany Henyard participated in a land bank scam, why it wouldn't work. Because I think we're all aware that Tiffany Henyard was known as somewhat of a slumlord. That's probably not a good thing to be known as if you're in the real estate business and you want to purchase property through the land bank. I think that Provision D, the slumlord status would fall under Provision D. Parties that are unable to demonstrate sufficient experience and capacity to perform in accordance with the requirements of the land bank. Did not pass go, did not collect $200. Ownerships, again, here's another one that applies. Ownership of properties that have any unremediated citations for violations of federal, state, or local code, ordinances, or regulations. You can't be a current slumlord. With this one, you could potentially be a slumlord in your past, but you can't be one currently. F, application for properties that have been used by the applicant or family member of the applicant in his or her personal residence at any time during the 12 months immediately preceding the submission of the application. So let's just run that one back because it was a little long. Application for properties that have been used by the applicant or a family member within the past 12 months. So in December 14th, I submitted an application with the Cook County Land Bank to buy property A. 4 months ago, my son submitted an application to purchase property A that didn't fall through. This is within a 12-month period, immediately preceding the date that I'm attempting to purchase it, where either myself or a family member of the applicant, which is me, as his or her personal residence at any time. So if it's your personal residence, you can't. And I think that's a good general rule. They want to try to prevent anything that's going to give a specter of potentially being shady. The last one is prospective transferee developer has a personal or professional affiliation with the former owner of the property, which would allow the former owner to benefit from the abatement of delinquent real estate taxes. So, I mean, I think a lot of these could apply. I think D could apply. I think E could apply. F maybe not because it's, I don't know. F maybe depending on if it's the personal residence at any time. G definitely could apply. And H, out-of-state residency or incorporation of an applicant or its members, officers, directors. I mean, that's just fair. This is just a common sense one to prevent people who sit on the board of directors or the executive of the land bank to be able to use the out-of-state entity to purchase. But there are at least three and a possible that could potentially have barred Tiffany Henyard from being able to purchase property just going through the land bank in general. Remember, there's a caveat. Here, we're on the assumption that everybody associated with the land bank is doing their job and aren't susceptible to any kickbacks. Again, this is a hypothetical. Don't want to get no lawsuits. This is just a hypothetical as to why land bank schemes are hard to do. All right, let's go to the next highlight, acquisition through delinquent tax enforcement proceedings. This is actually interesting because this is how the purchase of the delinquent properties and depressed properties can be manipulated. The land bank may acquire properties through the delinquent tax enforcement process, including but not limited to acquisition and annual tax sales or scavenger sales or subsequent sales as authorized by law. Considerations generally, let's see. This is just what the land bank can sell the property for. Land banks can sell property for anything, and it's not just limited to cash. It could be a deferred financing. It could be performance of a contractual obligation. We'll give you this property to do this revitalization effort if you agree to enter into a contract with Cook County for services A, B, C, D, and E for X amount of time. Imposition of restricted covenants or other obligations and responsibilities. Now, these next two are the ones that are probably the most important. Let me go ahead and check out some of the comments real quick before we dive into that, because I don't want the comments to get too far. Let's see. Jordan's full background is now available. Jordan will try, as Henyard did, to get the properties prior to going into the land bank. Interesting. If you're going to try to get the properties, though, like, I don't know. Like, I don't see the benefit. Maybe because I'm looking at it from maybe because I'm looking at it from an attorney. Like, if that is the play, let's just say hypothetically the play is, and I don't care who it is. If it was Henyard, if it was Mayor Tamale of Hot Rocket, some crazy county. Regardless, if the name of the game is to buy the property when it's low and sell it when it's high, being an elected official only makes that much more difficult. I don't know what, especially if I'm gonna do it in a shady manner, but if I'm doing it in a legit manner, I would actually rather not be an elected government official, because there's certain restrictions that would make it difficult. It's easier to do that legitimately or illegitimately if you're just acting as Joe Citizen. Like, once you have that fiduciary responsibility as an elected official, now you have to conduct actions in the best interest of the municipality. That's an extra burden. So I don't even know if the name of the game is a land grab. There's no benefit to running for mayor unless I can't even think of one. I'm gonna just be honest. I mean, like, Joe Citizen, this shit happens all the time. They got more pull than the mayor. Like, developer has probably more pull than the mayor in a lot of cities. That's just, it is what it is. I'm gonna just be honest. They probably own a lot of the mayors. So I think it completely puts them at a disadvantage if the name of the game is we're gonna try to do a land grab, whether it's through the land bank or not through the land bank. I just don't see how being a public official with now a fiduciary duty helps you to facilitate that, whether it's legitimate or illegitimate. That's my thought. What's going on, Lisa Lee? I appreciate you tuning in. Kenneth, what's going on, brother? Yeah. The goal is to identify properties that can be rehabbed and deliver affordable housing and revitalizing the neighborhood. Yep, I agree with that. Pretty Eyes, what's up? I mean, stealing properties, I don't know. I'm not going to call it stealing properties, but it's generally done the same everywhere. And I address all property owned by Tiff and Co. need to be reviewed to see the method to acquire them. But it's generally there's only a finite way to actually steal properties. Number one, the old school way, which is the most ridiculous. You can try to steal a property through adverse possession. I don't know what it is in Illinois, but I squat on your property for 7 years. That's what it is in most states. And you can actually squat on property and steal it from the government, but I don't know in Illinois, but in the states I practice in, 7 years to squat on property to steal it from an individual, 20 years of consecutive possession in an overt way to steal it from the government. So way number one, you can steal property as a squatter. Way number two, I've seen this done. This was actually attempted to be done to my great-great-grandmother by the state. This was crazy. They actually sent someone to my great-great-grandmother's house. This was actually a funny story. They sent somebody to my great-great-grandmother's house. She was probably 102 at the time. But she was still 102. And they sent this guy down there. It was a white guy. And they sent him down there to try to get her to sign paperwork to sign her house over to them. And it's hilarious because, if you're 102 years old in rural southern state, my grandma was like, I don't inherently trust this white guy. I think he's trying to finesse me. So what do you think that they did? They was like, oh man, we can't send this white guy down there. So they sent down an old black guy, old crusty black guy, And the old crusty black guy was actually able to finesse my 102-year-old great grandmother into signing this paperwork. We actually had to go into court and prove that it was under duress and she was in a weakened negotiating position. We ultimately got it worked out, but that's way number two. You can just pull the wool over the property owner's eyes and finesse the property. So adverse possession, pull the wool over the property owner's eye, or I mean, just strong on them, but something related expressly to interaction with the property owner. But that's not the way it's normally done. Normally it's not theft; it's just good business. I mean, depending how it's done, but the main way that people acquire properties legitimately or illegitimately is they wait till those properties become depressed. When those properties become depressed, now the thing that makes them fraudulent is people do things to depress the value of the property. We talked about this before in the last video. They may a have the property tax assessor assess the property at a lower value than what it actually is, and then they can use that lower evaluation of the price to coerce the owner into selling. Like, bro, I know you want $500,000, but the property assessor that I paid off, I mean, that the property assessor assessed the property at 300,000. I'm gonna give you $360,000. So the property owner's like, damn, my property only worth 300. He gonna give me 360. I need to take it. Unbeknownst to the property owner, the developer and the property assessor, they got a pay to play thing going on. So that's generally how it's done. It's some form of forcing a depressed asset, making that property price go down, whether it's through I've seen law enforcement officials who are high in law enforcement agencies, local law enforcement agencies, reallocate law enforcement resources from a community. Like, okay, let's not send cops to this side of town. We're going to divert all the law enforcement from that side of town so that the property becomes depressed. And then they have their straw person come in and acquire up all of those assets. So now, once they got all the assets, they move law enforcement resources back to that community and make it safe. And then the property value go up and they sell it. But generally, the name of the game, and for legitimate or illegitimate purposes, is finding a depressed property. When it's illegitimate, it's shady as to the way that the property is depressed. That's normally what you see. Let's see. I hope that answered your question. I hope that answered your question. But that's not just in Chicago. That's how it is across the board. We see it all the time. All right, let's see. LLC named after that would be lazy. I was actually going to go on the Secretary of State's website, but I just didn't have the bandwidth. I was going to go on the Secretary of State's website and pull up any company that we can find that had anybody who we know is associated with Tiffany Henyard to see what those companies were and what they engaged in. But that would have been a lot of work. I didn't have it in me today. Okay, I agree, Norm. I thought that from the first day she did her walk. The more she talks, the more I am convinced. Let's see. Oh, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. I'll make sure I try to say it in a way that's easier to explain. To make it. The problem is, like, I don't know. Once you do something for a long time, you just talk that way, and you assume that everyone else just know what those things mean. So if I ever explain something and it's like it kind of go over your head, just be like, bro, slow it down and explain it to me as if you was back on the block, and then I give you the block version, and that'll probably go over a little bit better. Let's see. So it is a blight thing. I started this video off by saying if you're going to do a scheme related to blighted property, related to a land bank, you should probably do the blighted property because that's harder to do. That's hilarious. Shoot it to me. Email it to me what you got. It's officialdebtfreedad@gmail.com. Just email it to me. Drop a subject in there so I know to look at it because I get a lot of emails. So if you got a subject line that'll stand out, or I know we talked about it, I'll be like, okay, let me make sure I check this one. Hey, shout out to you. I appreciate you for becoming a member. Hey, I never, I used to be like, hey, join, and I never asked people to join. But for the people who do join, I'm very appreciative of it. And when I do pre-recorded content, I make sure you all get early access to it. And I try to do it twice a month, members only live streams. And in those live streams, they get a little wild. I talk about, hey, being a federal probationary employee, every day I went to work, I was going into the parking garage. Boop. I was like, all right, my badge work. Woo! I was like, all right, my badge work. I'm good. So we talk about a lot of things in there. Some of the stories that, aren't as mainstream or that I didn't have time to cover during the week. And I talk a lot about what we have going on. So a round of applause to you for round of applause for becoming a channel member. I'm greatly appreciative of that. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you again. Can't thank you enough. Definitely appreciate it too. What's going on, Etal? What's good? Nothing much, man. We just talking land bank. Now let's go back into this land bank document. Then we'll hit up any questions. And if there's anything else we got to cover, we'll do it before I jump out of here. All right, let's jump back into this document real quick. These are the most important provisions we see in the document that are aimed at preventing the type of shit that we are talking about occurring in a land bank scheme. So again, a few things. Not that I'm telling people how to do it, but if I'm trying to do any finesse, I don't want to be an elected official. Like, I do not want to be like, it's one thing to do a scheme as a private citizen, because it may not be a scheme because you don't have a fiduciary duty. You don't have an obligation to act in the best interest of the people. If it's just me as a businessman, I have the obligation to act in the best interest of my business to make a profit. That actually may not have as shady of a smell to it as opposed to I want to do the exact same thing, but now I'm a council member. And damn it, because I'm a council member, now everybody expect me to do the right thing. What if the right thing for my constituents conflict with my business making a profit? One, you probably can't do it. You would have to recuse yourself from that transaction, but you would have to choose the constituents over your personal business. But that is not what happens. So if you are trying to do something, if I'm doing legitimate or illegitimate investments, I don't want to be a government official employee in any capacity, because now you have pesky conflicts of interest provisions. We're going to talk about one here, or some fiduciary duty because of your role that gives you additional scrutiny that you wouldn't have if you were just Joe Citizen operating on behalf of DFD Incorporated. All right. Approval of property transfers. You generally cannot do or purchase property via a land bank in most places. Not all land banks, they all are different wherever you go. But generally, one of the common things I see is transactions have to be approved, and those transactions have to be approved based on either the amount of the property or the volume of doors. Like, if you're buying a property that's 5 units, 5 doors, that would require some type of approval by a director or board. So this is another thing that makes it extremely difficult. Approval of property transfers. Transfers requiring executive director approval, with the exception of those transfers described in section 7.2. I hate when they write it like that. With the exception of the transfers described below, all property transfers may be approved by the director. All property transfers will be reported in writing to the board of directors at the immediately following board meeting. Approval authority levels, except as provided in land bank agreements. All property transfers for vacant land, commercial properties, industrial properties, and multifamily residential properties with 5 or more units shall be approved by the appropriate party, blah, blah, blah. That means if you're doing some big shit, if it costs over a certain amount of money, if there's a certain amount of doors, it has to be approval. All right. Under $150,000 requires the executive director approval. So, again, may or may not be a land bank transaction, but let's hypothetically, again, these hypotheticals, don't want to get a cease and desist letter from Max Solomon, but hypothetically, let's say that the land that was purchased by Kamal Woods, hypothetically, for $80,000 was done. It's under $80,000. That purchase would have to be approved by the executive director. If it was anything shady going on with that transaction, even though there's a bunch of other things that would have barred them that we talked about previously and we'll talk about below, but if there was anything shady going on, the person purchasing the property would actually have to grease the palms of the approval authority. The more people you have in a scheme, the more people you involve in your conspiracy, the higher likelihood that you're going to screw yourself. It is what it is. That's just kind of how it goes. So under $150,000, the executive director approving it. 150 to 250, the land bank transaction committee approves it. $250,000 or more, the land bank board of directors. Now, here, conflict of interest. So any land grab, any land purchase, legitimate or illegitimate, no matter how they're purchasing it, has to get approval by somebody based on the value of the property or based on the sale price of the property or how many doors are involved in this particular parcel of land or real property. All right. Conflict of interest, prohibited transactions. This is probably the most important thing that would bar them. And if a transaction occurred that violated any of these, as a prosecutor, I'm inherently looking at it as a scam because you purposely violated one of these provisions. Conflict of interest, prohibited transactions. You can't do business with the land bank if any of these things occur. No land bank employee, like the case we started off with, Mr. Seller, who was a land bank employee and had straw people buying these properties and selling them. No land bank employee, county elected official, appointed officer, vendor, or any individual with a familial relationship with the land bank employee. County elected official, land bank appointed officer, land bank vendor, as defined below, is permitted to acquire any real or personal property from the land bank, have a financial interest in any transaction. And you have to disclose familial relationships. Would Tiffany Henyard and Kamal Woods' relationship fall as a familial relationship? I think this needs to be rewritten, but let's talk about it. It says you have to disclose employment and familial relationships. All purchasers of property from a land bank have to disclose in writing any employment or family relationship. They may prevent the purchaser from acquiring a financial interest in the property. Familial relationships of vendors. They define familial relationships, and I think this is a terrible definition. Generally, it covers everything, but it's missing one thing. And we'll talk about it. You have a family relationship, and you'll be barred from buying property from the land bank if it's a person who is related to an official, an employee, a commissioner, appointee, essentially a spouse, whether by blood, marriage, adoption, as a parent, father, mother, son, daughter, brother, sister, uncle, aunt, great uncle, great cousin, nephew, niece, husband, wife, grandfather. They going in. Great uncle, great aunt, first cousin, mother-in-law, stepbrother, stepsister. I'm skipping around. Half brother, half sister, and including father, mother, grandfather, grandmother of the employees of anyone on the commission, aunt, uncle, daughter-in-law, stepbrother, half. Pretty much they covered everything that you could name. But there's one thing that I think creates I wouldn't use family relationship. I would say familial or domestic relationship. The reason I would say familial or domestic relationship, because a lot of times you see people, as my mother liked to say, shacking up. Y'all ain't married. Y'all just shacking up. You see people shacking up. That would qualify had they had domestic relationship for Tiffany Henyard, Kamal Woods situation. Under this, they don't have a familial relationship based on how it's defined. And normally, domestic violence court, if you're in domestic violence court, they define a familial relationship as anybody who has what anyone assumes is a familial relationship, cousins, first cousins. It covers all of this shit that we just read. But also, they define it as if you live together. So if two college roommates got into a fight, their case would actually end up in domestic violence court, even though they aren't a couple. But because they have a domestic relationship through cohabitation, they would end up in the DV court. And they would always feel awkward, like, "No, man, why are we in DV court? We were just we were just punching each other in the face." I'm like, "Oh, it's nothing about y'all personally. It's just because y'all it's just because y'all live together." So I think that's something that probably should be changed. But those are just some of the reasons. Let's close this out. Close. Let's pivot over here. But those are some of the reasons why, I mean, it's just so difficult to finesse from a land bank. You need a bogus buyer. You need to have a purchaser lined up. You need to grease the palms of somebody on the executive board or the executive director, whoever the approval authority is for that purchase. Then you have to do all of that without violating any of the conflicts through your job, if you're an elected official or you have a familial relationship. It's absolutely too many hurdles. I'm pretty savvy, and I don't think I could finesse. I'm pretty savvy, and I'm a law-abiding citizen, but I don't think I could finesse a land bank scam because there's so many hurdles to do. I just don't think it's possible and feasible to do. But I am interested in sending me that email related to the properties that were supposed to be blighted properties and destroyed, but ended up getting purchased, because that's a little bit that could be a little bit more complicated scam and could be a little bit more difficult for investigators to look at. So I'm interested to see what that says. All right, let's see. Okay. Interesting. Good. It's good to know somebody who got a personal so they can speak to it officially. Did Tiffany Hinder kind of do that by not issuing a liquor license to the business that needed it to survive? Then her brother or boyfriend planned to buy the business when it went under. Yeah, uh, that's what's being alleged as the scheme. I'm just kind of confused because they, if if that is true, what is alleged, it's kind of an analogous scheme. Where it got dumb, though, we're going off of assumptions. This is a hypothetical. I'm not saying that they did this. We're just using what Harley said as a hypothetical. This is what I don't understand, right? Because there was actually a way that they could have did that transaction. Let's say the transaction, we're assuming the transaction was legit, right? Because this is where it got weird. You purchased the property for $80,000. You sell it for $200,000. Then they make this improvement on the property and put this $6 million restaurant on the property. Now you're like, oh snap! I only made $120,000. I could have sold it for $500,000 had I known. It's just stupid to me. I don't know. I'm not gonna say it's stupid. It's confusing because at one point they had the leverage. We're assuming that transaction was legit. If that's a legit transaction, they actually had the leverage to be able to leverage the purchasers of that $80,000 lot who purchased it for $200,000. They had the leverage to be able to dig into their pockets if they want to. This is what should have happened if the transaction was legit. I got a property for $80,000. You come to me and say, hey, I want to purchase the property for $200,000. The very first question that I want to know is, tell me, what are your plans with the property? What do you plan to do? I know there's a abandoned, unused veterinarian clinic vet on it. What do you plan to use it for? Once you got the property and you know what they're planning on using it for, because they chose that property because they wanted it. If they didn't want that property, this opportunity to make money would have never came to you. Once you actually ask the right questions and find out what they want to use the property for, now you're in a position to use your property as leverage. This is the perfect property for your restaurant. How about this? I won't sell you the property, but I'll grant you an easement to utilize the property for 5 years. After the 5 years, I'll sell the property to you at 30% below what the current market value of the property would be. Had they done that, that probably would have been a multi-million dollar deal. They own the property, they asked the right questions, they found out that they want to build a restaurant on the property. Hey, I won't sell you the property. What I'm going to do is I'm going to lease you this property, give you an easement to use this property for 5 years. For 5 years, you could pay me $20,000 a year for the next 5 years and use this property. At the end of the 5 years, you have the first right to purchase the property at 30%, 50%. You could have said 50% below what the market value would be at the property at that, what the market value would be for the property. They probably would have walked away with like a mil plus easily. Even just leasing them the right to use the land for 5 years for $20,000 a year would have damn near got them what they got in that one transaction. Plus, they would have had it, or they could have, if they were really smart, they could have said, "Yo, I'll lease you this land for 5 years for $25,000 a year for 5 years. After that, I'll actually give you the property for a 5% equity interest in your company." They had all the leverage, but because they didn't ask the right questions, because they didn't have the right business acumen, they couldn't leverage it properly. Now, we're assuming that they bought the property legitimately in that example, but that's just what we saying. That's what we saying. All right, let's see. Yeah, there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on. But the biggest story and the most important story that I know nobody's going to cover, I'm going to cover it, is going to be how Dalton moves forward. A lot of people aren't going to give a shit about it because it's not drama, it's not fight, it's not hood book of shit going on. But I'm actually interested to see how they recover after the election, how things evolve, how long will it take them to be able to climb out of whatever financial deficit? Because once the new mayor is in, and the new supervisor is in, we're going to have access to all of the records and we're going to know what the mess really looked like because Lori Lightfoot didn't have any subpoena power. And I'm interested to see how long it's going to take them to dig out of that. And I mean, really, I just want to see the comeback story. I like the comeback story. You go through some bullshit, you go through some drama, some stuff, then you come back stronger. That's what I'm here for. And I hope media outlets cover it half as much as we all covered the hood drama. Let's see. They here in Los Angeles recently pulling up at Marathon, Nipsey Hussle brother, joint spending taxpayer money. Oh, they took a picture in front of the mural. They probably took a picture in front of the mural and everything. Let me see. Did I miss it? I missed it. Was it a comment? Ah, uh, okay. They may not be broke. Let's say that a lot of misappropriate because we got. I don't think that's the case. I mean, this is just me. I would be shocked if there could be some account somewhere with you know 1.5 million dollars in there. That could be the case. Um, I would be shocked if that's the case. First, I would actually be shocked if there's money, if there's account with that much money in them from all the alleged finessing that's going on. if there are accounts with large amounts of money in them, there is no way in hell that the illegally obtained money was actually washed and made to be legitimate money prior to going into that account. So they could have money, but it's not money that was properly laundered to look like a legitimate transaction. I personally think the Tiffany Henyard Cares Foundation was an attempt at trying to find a mechanism to potentially launder money, and it just fell through. But they may actually have dough. If there's a comment I missed, type it again because it's gonna be hard to go back and find all of it. You have to pay taxes. Yeah, that's true. That's actually a good point. That's actually a good point. Let's see. I wonder just how many burner phones Hilliard may have. I remember someone noting in one live board meeting video that Hilliard had a different phone, not just a case, but a different phone. Hey, I mean, hey, I got two phones, one for the plug and one for the. You gotta have. Hey, you can't be doing everything on your legit phone. Jamal Smith, Aunt Murray, he is though. Hey, shout out to him. And shout out to not gonna say shout out to him. I retract that statement. Not shout out to him. All right. One for each person she contacts regularly. That's complicated too. And they could actually find those. Burner phones is he stays. No, I be saying all sorts of stuff. Y'all should see me in trials. I said I had a trial once, and what was the phrase I said? I said y'all familiar, y'all know what copacetic mean? It's actually like copacetic. I used that during closing argument. I was like, I want to say I think the guy got it, if I'm not mistaken, I think the client got his ass whipped by police officers. Like he was like a college student, but if you just would have saw him, you would have thought he was a serial killer. He had like teardrop tattoos, but he was like graduating college and everything. And the officers jacked him up. And I remember in closing arguments, it was great too because the day of his trial, he was actually graduating from college, and I was like, hey, I'm not saying I told him, but he came in this cap and gown, and we made sure that got in testimony. And I was like, here he is driving, minding his business until he's accosted by these police officers. He's thinking everything's copacetic. And I used that. And I remember the chief was sitting right there. Get down, dog. Get down. I'm almost done. I remember the chief was sitting right there. And afterwards, I won. We got a not guilty. He was like, hey, man, you did a good job. But did you use the word copacetic? I was like, yeah, they knew exactly what I meant. Well, as soon as I said it, I said, he is thinking everything is copacetic. And everybody was like, all the jurors was like, yes, he did. He thought everything was fine, but it wasn't. So, hey, let's see. She's going into custody. If you're still getting subpoenas, you're still getting grand jury subpoenas at this stage, and the grand jury subpoenas aren't for documents. The grand jury subpoenas is for actual testimony. I'm not doing all of that. I could think of maybe 2 out of hundreds of investigations, prosecutions that I've dealt with personally. I can think of 2 where grand jury subpoenas was issued and nothing happened. And those were cases I adopted. And had I had those cases from the inception, I wouldn't have issued grand jury subpoenas. I think that they were done prematurely, but by the time I got it, it was already done. If I go through the process of I have a grand jury convened and we're bringing you in, we're not wanting documents. We want grand jury testimony for you to come in and put something on the record. Nah, if I'm getting to that point, it's like I've done all that work. Somebody going to jail. I'm not doing all this for shits and giggles. Part of my language. You think I'm gonna spend all my time, the agents, the auditors looking over the financial records, wasting the grand jury's time, sitting there going back and forth with the investigator and the attorney to make sure they got all the facts to be able to charge honest services fraud or whatever they're going to charge her with. No, they are not doing all this as a show. And I think the Northern District of Illinois, I think that the Trump Department of Justice is going to make an example out of Tiffany Henyard. Oh man, he got Airbnb properties. That's the TV guy. That could be that. Now that would be problematic. And if they were using village funds, there's the other thing that's just is stupid is that I'm not gonna say it's stupid. The other thing that would be difficult with using the village funds is actually being able to get those funds with breaking the custody link to the actual village. Like if you use a credit card, you can easily find it. If you write a check out of a certain account, you can easily find it. Like really, again, I'm not telling nobody how to do crime or commit crime, but really the only way to misuse and misappropriate funds from a municipality and then not be that direct chain of funds from county A, municipality A to person A or person B. The only way to do that is through contracts. Like you get somebody a contract, it looks legitimate. That's really that is the only way to take money from a municipality and make it a little bit more difficult for investigators to be able to do, because now you have to look at the validity of the contract. Any other method of taking money from a municipality, there's going to be a direct chain from that transaction to the person who did it. You avoid that. Most scammers avoid that by trying to get some contract with the municipality, some no bid contract where they can siphon off money, overpay for services that they either overpay for services that's being provided or don't provide services at all and just take the money. That's normally how those are done. Like the sidewalk. Let's see. I ain't telling you nothing for that very reason. Yeah, that's fair. Absolutely. Unfortunately, when you think that you're a master, but yeah, they had all the cards on the table where they could have manipulated that deal and got them $1 million easily if the original property transaction was legitimate. Sharecropper mentality. Facts. Let's see. Wasn't Delgado? I don't know. Delgado name is all over everything. I don't know if they were. That would be people got to start using different attorneys. They made a video. Let's see. Oh, I need to go check that out. Stop, dog. I'm coming. Yo. He said, "Hey, his dude want to play fetch at the most inopportune times." Why would you be shocked? Yeah, those dorm trustees have to run again. Again, the general. Yeah, it would definitely make a wonderful Netflix series. Yep, and Tubi movie. I'm gonna check that out. Man with opinion says she has several aliases, several business failures, and bankruptcies. I'm gonna check it out. I'm gonna subscribe to that channel, so I'm gonna go check that out, and we'll dive in. In any event, she's not gonna win. If she won, it would be like the greatest upset. This is actually a good question. Do you think they would go on the run? I'll be honest. I would. I would probably. I would probably say yes. And the only reason I came to that conclusion is, let's say that they were arrested and they were having a bond hearing. I thought about it in the context of, if they were arrested, would I ask the judge to put a very high bond on them because I believe that they pose a flight risk, I think the answer would probably be yes. So if I'm putting a bond on them, excuse me, if I'm asking the judge for a secure bond in a large amount to make sure they come to court, that means I don't trust them to come to court. So yeah, I I think that's a legit possibility. I think that's a legit possibility. It would be very stupid to do, but I think it's a legit possibility. And if they did show up for their first appearance, I would ask the judge, if I'm the prosecutor, to put a bond on them, because I think there is. I mean, hey, she made $300,000 plus for a lot of years. She does have the means to potentially elude. Dude, I know he keep bringing this toy. All right, we about to end it. Go. Don't bring it back in here, bro. This dog is annoying. All right, real quick. Eh, yeah, I know. Is it I the you missed the entire point. The entire point was that as a black woman who was 100 and something years old, who is like one generation removed from actual sharecropping post slavery, she inherently isn't going to trust a white person. You just completely took what I said and said, why you got to blame the white guy? Nah, one, I'm blaming him because he showed up to try to do it. She just has an inherent distrust. Considering her background, I think it's possible. She grew up damn near on a plantation at 100 and something years old, and this was 15 years ago. So yeah, don't sometimes you're like, man, I can't see any trees. It's too much forest in here. Like, nah, just take it back. He was like, oh man, you blame the white guy. Yeah, I'm blaming both of them. They both showed up to do something cruddy. The point was that because of her background and her age, she has an inherent mistrust for an older white guy. That I don't think that's possible. The same way some people have a mistrust for law enforcement because of what they've seen and lived with in their past. So come on, man, let's stay on topic here, bro. Let's stay on topic. It's not a race thing. I'm telling the story as it happened. The white guy, what he had to do with it? He came there to try to do the same shit that the black guy did. So what's the difference? The difference is she didn't trust one but got finessed by the other. To me, that means they both ain't shit. I don't care if they was plaid. But that's just me. I digress. I don't know. If somebody tried to scam you, I don't know. I don't think the race plays a factor in it. Like, oh man, they both tried to scam me, but damn that one guy who got me. Nah, both of y'all ain't shit. That's how I look at it. Let's see. Trump is definitely not going. Hell no. Trump gonna have nah. No, the answer is no. She won't be getting saved. That would be interesting. That would be interesting. Grant funds are funds that are often finessed and scammed a lot. That would be interesting. You ain't missed nothing, Paul. We just in here talking about land banks. We just in here talking about land banks. That's all. I agree with that. Nah, the FBI can't pull their passports without charges being filed. Um, the only thing that can happen, really, they can voluntarily submit their passports, but the FBI won't unilaterally put them. You got to think about it. When Diddy was arrested, the feds didn't pull his passports. Diddy actually, it wasn't really shit. He didn't do anything, but he actually voluntarily surrendered his passports to his attorney. That means he didn't do anything. But nah, the FBI, they can't unilaterally do that. Let's see. That's crazy. Let's see. Man, this dog is tiring. He's supposed to be my daughter dog, and now he turned into mine. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, hey, shout out to Mom for life. Hey, I'm about to hop off here. This dog is about to get on my nerves. He just keep bothering me. So I'm about to hop off here. I am going to do a video. It'll be about 20 minutes. Bro, it'll be about 20 minutes. And the video is going to be my reaction to the 911 call regarding Mr. Telvin Osborne, the brother who was killed by his girlfriend. We talked about that in the live stream. It took me some time to find the video. Then I had to edit it to make it so we can actually hear it. The audio is about 19 minutes long. I'm going to go through that audio call, and essentially I'm going to point out the things that are going to be good for her defense, which I don't think is going to fly, but we don't know. We don't know. But we're going to point out the things in the call that are good for her defense and the things in the call that are going to be good for the prosecution, and make a judgment on overall how that audio is going to play out in court. Let's see. That'll be good. Tax evasion will be good. Hey, shout out to my guy Paul. I appreciate you. Hey, I appreciate you. You definitely get a round of applause. Hey, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Paul. I appreciate you for becoming official co-counsel. Like I said earlier, since you was late, anytime I do a pre-recorded video, I make sure that the channel members who are official co-counsel, I make sure y'all get early access. And a couple times a month, we do members only live stream. And I mean, y'all get priority production. So if it's something that you want to talk about, definitely shoot me an email. And if we can get it into the content, we'll get it into the content. I appreciate y'all, everybody who tuned in, everybody who interacted. I appreciate all the comments, good, bad, indifferent. I appreciate it all. Y'all take care, be blessed, have a safe weekend. Peace. Oh, shout out to you too. See, I can't even log off. Hey, shout out to you for hey. You get an actual real round of applause. I appreciate that. I'm truly grateful. Like I said, I'm grateful for everybody for allowing me an opportunity for y'all to sit here and listen to what I have to say about stuff. And I try my best. I want to make it interactive. So if I could get to y'all in the comments, y'all email me. If you hit me on IG or TikTok, I'm probably not going to get back to you because I rarely check those. But if you email me, I'm definitely going to try my best to get back to you all. Hey, y'all be blessed. Have a safe one. Peace.